Today is a good day, PJ
A
Glasser.
great day, Joe.
This is the happiest I've been to start one of these podcasts. Joe Malpa here alongside PJ Glasser for episode 5 of Glass of Joe. And finally, it took till episode 5, but we have baseball back, PJ.
Yes, we do, Joe. It's about damn time. I took them long enough.
I don't want to like jinx it, but like we have it tentatively back. At least there's an agreement. They still got to get over all other humps that have to do with coronavirus itself. But finally, the MLBPA and the MLB are in agreement. 60 games set to begin either July 23rd or July 24th. So a month from now. And PJ, we started this with Tim Kirchin as our guest. He started off by saying there would be a season. His confidence wasn't totally there. Fast forward. Let's see, who was the next guest that we brought it up with? We brought it up with very, very briefly with Joe Beninati, just talking about how all sports might come up, and it was kind of iffy. Now, finally, it is back, and we are good to go.
And did you think about Tim yesterday? I mean,
I did.
You had to.
Tim was in the back of my mind all day yesterday.
I felt Tim, guys like that you felt good for. And like you said, I'm happy it's back. And to me, yes, it's only 60 games, but at least we got something. Exactly. And to me, this almost has like a college football regular season feel to it.
True.
And everybody knows the importance of the regular season. They know the importance of every game. To me, the aspect that's really not getting talked about enough is how much pressure are on the managers. I think that all the managers will be getting their money's worth this season. You're going to find out your ball club how good your manager is because every game is so important. It's going to be interesting to see the strategy between whether or not teams go with 4 or 5 man rotations. Now the fact that both leagues have the DH, all those NL managers have to adjust with the DH every single day. So it's going to be interesting to see all that. I love the new schedule, by the way, too. The fact that there are 40 divisional games. Mm-hmm. So already you had 60 games, and now 10 of those games are against each of your divisional opponents. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be – I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's probably – look, obviously you want more games, but it's under the circumstances probably the best they could do with Manfred mandating it and the two sides not really agreeing on something else after months of negotiation. It's kind of frustrating that we ended up back at the agreement that was already agreed upon on March 26th. So, if they would have agreed to this sooner, it could have probably been 82 games. But because they had to drag it out, it's only 60. But I was reading a piece in The Athletic that Joe Davis retweeted this past week. I saw it. It came up on my timeline on Twitter. And it was way above my head. It was like a statistical analysis that had like R factors and certain percentages. I only took intro to probability, and that was 4 years ago. So over my head. But the gist of it was that there was a big difference between a 48-game season, if that's what it was, or like 89. From 89 games on, with very, very good accuracy, you could kind of already predict where the standings would end up after 162 games. Granted, there's going to be outliers. Look at the Nats last year, got hot in the back half of the season. There's always outliers. But by and large, a statistically significant amount, you could predict really well at game 89. So obviously we're not at 89, we're at 60. But within the article, it said 60 is the bare minimum that you have to get to in order to feel some sort of statistical significance. So it's not the 162 that's really representative. Last year the Mets made a late run. They would have been dead in the water at 60. The Nats won the World Series, dead in the water at 60. So it's obviously not going to be normal, but it's not a normal year. We had to find the best alternative. 82 would have been nice, but as far as anybody who wants to delegitimize the season, statistically speaking, over the last few decades from the research that was done in that piece in The Athletic, 60 was the floor they had to get to, and they're there. And what you mentioned about more pressure on the managers night in, night out, sure, it's only 60 games, but it's going to be 60 intense playoff-like games. Like in a 162-game season, a Tuesday night when the Yankees are playing the Orioles, the Yankees don't care. Now they still win 17-2 because Gleyber Torres hits a million home runs at
easy.
But on that Tuesday night, random Tuesday against a bottom feeder like that, how many teams mail it in? How many teams don't care? I see it all the time with now granted the Mets aren't of the ilk of the Yankees, but I saw it all the time last year with the Mets. they'd have a great series against a good team when they're on their A game, and then they'd have a 3-game set against the Marlins and get swept or lose 2 out of 3 because they just didn't care. So you're taking out of the equation all of those, games that you don't care about, and it's all important. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Think about this too, just the perception of 60 games, right? In the midst of 162, you have teams go on winning streaks all the time, 8, 9, 10, 11 games. Say a team like the Orioles, the Marlins, the Royals, the Tigers, teams that are thought to not be very good this year. Think about if they get hot and win 11 games in a row. And then over their next 10 games, they maybe go 5-5. Just like that, they're 16-5, and they're a third of their way done with the season.
Exactly.
So, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it really is a free-for-all. These are still major league players at the end of the day. You get a couple hot pitchers that start games for you. You get a couple hot hitters in your lineup that win a couple games for you. Especially with all the divisional games, you never know.
And I went back and listened to our interview with Tim, and he said, 78, 74, 82, all those numbers, no argument, legit season. You get down to 48, no. But there was that gray area of the 60s that he briefly mentioned but didn't touch on too much. So we ended up in that gray area. But like we said, at this point, everybody's on equal footing. They're all dealing with it. Sure, you might have a team that gets lucky who wouldn't have made it in a 162-game season. But by and large, again, with the statistical significance shown in that study from The Athletic, you're going to get the best teams in with maybe a couple outliers. It's weird for me being a Mets fan. I almost there's part of me that hopes, as much as I think we should look at the World Series champ as legitimate no matter who wins it, because, again, everybody's on equal footing, I almost hope the Mets don't win it, because I'm a Mets, Jets, Rangers fan, and none of those 3 teams in my lifetime have won. So I almost kind of hope that the Mets don't, because I don't want the first time that I experience a championship to be looked at as tainted by other people. Like, I don't want to ever have that question hanging over my head, if everything goes sideways and I'm an 85-year-old man on my deathbed and the Mets 2020 shortened season championship is the only one I ever got to see. First of all, something went terribly wrong. If in that 60-year span, nobody else.
That's the only one.
But if that's the only one, I would hate that, because everybody would still be like, oh, but it was 60 games. It doesn't really count. So I almost kind of hope I'm in a weird spot where I look at it as legitimate, but I know other people won't. So I don't want to deal with the jokes the rest of my life that, the one time your team won something, it was 60 games. So I almost kind of hope the Mets don't win it.
And can I tell you, I think the shortened season favors teams like the Mets, like the Nationals, teams with great starting pitching, because, again, if it's tight down the stretch, especially with all the time they've had to rest, DeGrom, Syndergaard, they can go on 3 days rest. And all of a sudden, they're pitching.
Syndergaard's out for the year. He tore his UCL. But the rest of the guys.
Okay,
that's something that I even totally forgot about, because there just hasn't been any baseball for months. So,
you're right. I know. I got to look at all the new players on the new teams to try and remember.
I'm excited to see finally Mookie Betts in a Dodger uniform and Garrett Cole in a Yankee uniform, possibly. I know the news came out that his wife is pregnant, and one of the stipulations they announced also yesterday was that it was previously legislated like it's law. It was previously stated that any player who decided to opt out for personal health reasons would still get paid. They expanded that, to my understanding, to if you have an immediate family member or household member that is at risk, you could also opt out and still get paid. So, but based on that, if that report does end up coming totally to fruition, Garrett Cole could opt out because of his pregnant wife. So we might not see Garrett Cole in a Yankee uniform yet, but as far as everything you're saying, we'll finally get to see all these new faces in new places.
The teams that you were picking, if this was a 162, so the Dodgers, the Yankees, do you still see them as the favorites?
Those are still the teams that I'm picking. Look, at the end of the day, they're the best teams, whether it's 10 games, whether it's 40 games, whether it's 240 games, they're the best teams. Over the long slog of a 162-game season, it's able to balance out because, if last year all the injuries the Yankees had, they had all that time to make it up. Now this year, for example, if Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge go on the 15-day injured list, well, that's probably going to end up being 7 games, 8 games, which now instead of being a small fraction of your season, it's a much larger percentage of your season, about 10%. So it could hurt them. It could hurt these bigger teams if guys get injured. But, again, that Athletic article is what I keep going back to, the statistical significance of 60 games. They got to that number. The cream will rise to the top. you can, of course, have a runner. Like last year, I know the Mariners were really hot early on, and then ended up on a historically bad losing season. So you'll get those teams that will sneak in instead of fading. But by and large, the best teams will win. And especially when it comes down to the playoffs, even if a team as bad as the Marlins sneaks in, you think they're going to get past the Dodgers in the first round? No, like they're probably not going to. So sure, it might be, it might kind of cheapen making the playoffs, but I don't think it cheapens the champion, because at the end of the day, you're still going to get those best teams in the playoffs who make the runs. I'm very excited to see how many statistical records could get broken. Like, will we see a 400 hitter, all those things. So that's what I'm keeping my eye on. What will Mike Trout bat 500? Something crazy like that.
Something too, everybody's talked about how bad this has been for baseball. I wonder, though, if the fact that it's only 60 games, the fact that there's going to be so much emphasis on every game and these teams will be trying so hard, if it's almost good for the game because of how intense it'll be, because of all the divisional games, you feel like they're going to be close. I'm trying to be optimistic here. I'm glad baseball's back, but
of course. In a way that could be better, and you're going to get more intense games. But again, just, as far as taking a step back and looking at it all, how badly baseball dropped the ball, because they had a chance to be out there in May if they wanted to, if they were able to agree on something. Back when we were talking to Tim around Memorial Day, they could have probably started first week of June or so. So they had a chance to already be in action for a month and a half. And instead, they're only going to get a 7-day, if everything is able to get up off the ground running, NHL, NBA, MLB, they're only going to get a 7-day window where they're the only sport in town. So they totally dropped the ball on that. And again, for what? It would have been different if they ended up agreeing on something.
Right.
But they didn't, and they just went back to the March 26th agreement. So that's what the frustrating part is. And looking forward, that's why I don't have much faith that they're going to work something out after 2021 when the CBA expires. Like, there's just still so much animosity between both sides. I know one of the big issues is the players want the owners to open their books and show the numbers, which only the Atlanta Braves do that now as a publicly traded company. And that's one of the big sticking points that I believe is being pushed for by Scott Boras. So Scott Boras denies any involvement. 1,000,000% Scott Boras is involved in all of this, one of the most powerful men in baseball. And for him as an agent, as far as getting the players possibly more money, getting more money in his own pocket, working off commission, getting the owners to open their books is a big chunk of this equation, because some of the players and the MLBPA, they don't feel like the owners are being truthful as far as how much they are making versus how much they might lose this year. And that's a big sticking point that I know it seems like they want in the next CBA is for the owners to open their books. So there's so many things that are still going to end up in heated debates. They're going to be very contentious about. But at the end of the day, at least we get something. It's not much. It might still not get up off the ground and running to address that elephant in the room because of the spikes in certain states. But at least for the first time in months, there's something to celebrate and be happy about and have hope about.
And you mentioned they dropped the ball. They'll have their 1 week in the sun when they start the 23rd or 24th of July. And then here comes the NHL. Here comes the NBA. You'll have all of them competing against each other. So we'll see what the baseball numbers are like. We'll see what the hockey numbers are like.
And there's also the extra inning rules too. I'm curious to see if that'll stick in the future.
Yes.
And my favorite part about that, as far as like statistical anomalies, now you technically could have a perfect game and lose. Because if you've got, say, a low pitch count and you pitch into the 10th inning, runner starts on second base. If you're pitching in the bottom half of the inning, so, all right, Jacob deGrom is on the road against the Marlins. 0-0 game, bottom 10, Marlins coming up. Start with a guy on second. You get a sack bunt, you get a sack fly, and he had a loss in a perfect game. So you could actually you could always get a loss in a no-hitter because of an error, a walk, hit by pitch, whatever.
Yeah.
But now technically you could actually get a loss in a perfect game this year.
Only you, Joe, think like that. That's why I love you. That's beautiful. Well done. Well, one of our guests coming up knows a whole lot about baseball and plenty more. We are delighted to talk to him, the great Sean McDonough. Joins us next. Pleased to be joined now by play-by-play broadcaster for ESPN, one of the radio voices of the Boston Red Sox, Sean McDonough. Sean, thank you so much for being here. How are you? How's everything going?
Everything is, I guess, as good as it can be in the world that we live in. It's crazy and sad, and for those of us who do this for a living, a little bit boring. We haven't worked a sporting event since mid-March, but other than that, we're fine. Just praying that all this suffering that the world is going through will come to an end soon.
No question. We have a lot of things we want to talk to you about today. We're excited to have you, and we're just going to jump right into it with the big story of the weekend coming out of college football news. The 23 Clemson players that tested positive for COVID-19 and at least 30 LSU players that were quarantined. After hearing that, how optimistic are you for a college football season?
Well, obviously that diminishes anybody's optimism, I think. It's cause for concern. I've wondered all along, just logistically, how this might be done. You kind of had hoped until recently that it was trending in the right direction in terms of number of cases and spread and that sort of thing. But now that cities and states have reopened, at least in phases, and people are going back out, we're seeing those spikes all over the place, including in Arizona, where I'm sitting right now. So still optimistic, but probably less so than I was a week or so ago.
Now, if they do end up playing games, we all know it's going to be different for the players possibly playing empty stadiums when they're used to upwards of 100,000 fans. But how weird would that feel for you calling a game in front of an empty stadium?
But I guess it would remind me of when I first started out 100 years ago doing minor league baseball, when there was basically nobody in the stands either. So, back then you were kind of conscious of how loud you were talking because you realized you were almost distracting the people who were sitting in the stands near you. It will be strange. I think it'll require an adjustment for all of us. I still don't know, what the plan is. I think those things are in flux. I know there are a lot of conversations going on at all the networks and with network people and conference commissioners and schools and that sort of thing about how the logistics will play out when they start playing again. We just found out yesterday that they're going to play the PGA Championship in August in San Francisco. That's been given the green light. So I'm going to be a part of the broadcast team for ESPN for that. So right now, really just waiting to find out, are we actually going to go there? Are we going to broadcast it from someplace else in the studio? Are we going to do it from our homes? There are a lot of variables, but as long as it's not sitting in the stadium with fans there around you, it's going to be different for sure.
And now we know you're a man of many hats. You already mentioned just now you've got golf coming up. One of those is your baseball cap. So what do you make of the 60-game season that we're now slated to see?
Well, as we're talking, I think we're still waiting to make sure that the other things are solved, the health and safety protocols and that sort of thing. There are a couple more issues. Sounds like the players are going to say, okay, we'll go ahead and play this schedule. From what I read this morning on ESPN.com, if they don't, they basically have to go on strike, and that doesn't seem likely. It would be incredibly tone deaf, even more tone deaf than both sides have been to this point, that they're still slugging it out over money and this sort of thing with all the things that are going on in the world. So that'll be interesting. It'll be fun in some ways. I mean, over the course of 162 baseball season, often you say, well, we lost tonight, we'll come back and get them tomorrow night. Well, every loss is really going to seem much more impactful in a 60-game schedule. So it'll be fun. I hope they can do it, and hope everybody stays healthy while they're doing it.
You just talked about it a little bit. My next question for you is going to be about that relationship between the owners and the players. You've covered baseball. You've called it for spanning 3 decades now. You know how the relationship between the players and owners work. Do you think this is the low point of the relationship so far? And because of the rift right now between the two sides, do you think we could see another possible work stoppage when the CBA is up after the 2021 season?
I'm not sure it's the low point. I think canceling the World Series was pretty low. I think it's the most, I hate to keep using the same phrase, tone deaf, that they could have this kind of a public spat about money, given the financial situation that they all enjoy, or at least the owners and most of the players enjoy. So it's crazy that we could be dealing with the pandemic and now dealing with all of the racial stuff that's going on in the country, things that are really important, and that these guys could have this kind of a public mud fight over whatever. So It's pathetic on all sides. I've said many times there's really no side to root for, in my opinion. But at least they're going to play a 60-game schedule. At least it looks that way. Not to the other part of your question, yes. I mean, given the history, given the rancor in this particular problem, I think we're looking at problems going forward too. Issues that will have to be addressed with an eye toward next year.
Wanted to take you back now to some of your earlier days in broadcasting when you were with the Red Sox doing TV play-by-play from 1988 to 04. 04, of course, the year that the Red Sox ended the curse, won the World Series. Watching that team every day, being around them every day during the regular season, did you ever get a sense that there was something different, something special about that team?
Not in the first half of the season. They kind of limped along a little bit. I think at one point they were 41-40 or something like that. I think when they traded Nomar Garcia-Parra, that changed things for a variety of reasons, and I think that was the turning point. But for the first half of that season, for sure, it was kind of the narrative was that they were having a disappointing year. So it is instructive, I guess, to how things can change, particularly if you make a couple of changes. I watched Moneyball the other day. This reminder of all of a sudden you can win 20 games in a row, right? When it looks like you're going nowhere. So you never know. It's one of the great things, obviously, about sports is it can change, and sometimes it's hard to explain why. But obviously, it became a special season, and I was grateful that it happened when it did, because as you said, PJ, that was my last season doing the game. So it was nice to have it be in a historic season where they ended the 86-year curse.
And piggybacking off of that, after they made the comeback against the Yankees, did you have any doubts at that point?
No. Once that happened, I think you kind of felt like, okay, this is destiny. I mean, if that happened, coming from 3-0 down, and then they didn't win the World Series, that was probably been more fitting of the narrative of Red Sox history then. Okay, how are we going to find a way to mess this up now? So, but it's funny that you mentioned that. The much earlier in that calendar year, dear friends of mine asked me to come to their wedding in Hawaii, in Maui. Right, not a tough assignment. In the end of October, November, I can't remember what it was exactly, but sure, of course, I'd be honored. Blah blah blah. So as the season's going along, I didn't really think about it. Their wedding is during the World Series. And then as the Red Sox started to turn around, I thought, oh, their wedding is going to be during the World Series. And then, so in my own mind, when it's 3-0, it was like, well, now at least I won't have to worry about, I'm going to be in Hawaii when the Red Sox are playing in the World Series. So, of course, it happened. So now I'm thinking, should I bail out on their wedding? I mean, that would be a kind of a lousy thing to do as a friend. And it was kind of a small wedding. So I go to the first 2 games at Fenway, as if we can't, TV announcers, local TV, we can't broadcast the game. So I was just there as a fan. I ran into a buddy of mine in the concourse who said, hey, I was going to see you. I've got a private plane taking us to St. Louis for games 3 and 4. I have a house. We have a chef. He named all these fun people who are mutual friends of ours. And I said, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm leaving tomorrow morning. I'm flying to Hawaii to go to a friend of mine's wedding. And he's like, oh the Red Sox are going to win the World Series for I said, I know. But, one of the things my dad always said was, you have to do the principled thing. And, the people are the most important thing. So literally the next morning I'm sitting in Logan Airport. It's one of these 17-leg flights from Boston to Maui, because I was using my frequent flyer miles, right? So they make it difficult. So you have to go, like Atlanta, Winnipeg, Tokyo, whatever. So I finally get there. I drive all the way across. When you get to Maui, the Kapalua is probably another hour drive. Rent the car, drive over. It's been probably a 20-hour, 24-hour travel day somewhere there. I get there, and the about to be married couple was standing in the lobby greeting people, and she says, I can't believe you came. I told Mark to tell you it's okay if you don't come.
Oh my God.
The Red Sox are in the they're going to win the World Series.
Oh my goodness.
I looked at my friend, Really? So
Do they have the radio on? Do they have the radio on during the reception?
Well, because of the time difference there, and we were there a day or two early. We were all by the pool in the late afternoon, Hawaii time, watching. There were a lot of Boston people there, and so Keith Folk flips the ball over to first base, and people are throwing each other in the pool and throwing drinks on each other, and so I had told everybody the story, and I talked about how my dad was never going to. My dad had just passed away. He was never going to see the Red Sox win the World Series, but and I told the story about hearing his voice in my head when I was sitting in the airport. So literally, we're all celebrating, and a buddy of mine, there had just been a little rain shower. That happens a lot in Hawaii, especially that afternoon. There's a little passing shower. My buddy said, "Hey, look!" And right over the top of the hotel was a rainbow. Literally at the moment,
Wow.
The Red Sox. And he said, "That's your dad. He's up there watching. And he's proud of you for doing the right thing." So
that's awesome.
I don't know if it was the right thing, but at least my friends can never say I blew off their wedding for the Red Sox. But so I was actually not there when the Red Sox won the World Series, but I do have a ring to prove that I was a very, very small part of the season.
There you go. And obviously you mentioned your personal ties to the team. And last year you were able to return to Fenway for some games on the radio. Being from there, all the personal connections you've already laid out, how cool is it after that 15-year layoff to be back calling games for them again?
Yeah, I was working on 15 years rest. I was like a pitcher was ready to go. It was really cool. When they first called me the radio network, first of all, I love doing radio. And one of my regrets is that I've done very little radio really since I left minor league baseball in the mid-'80s, a long time ago. So when the Red Sox called and said, WEEI, the flagship station of their radio network, called and said, "We'd like you to come back and do some games," I was really excited. And then friends of mine said, some of them said, "Why would you want to do that? You're busy the rest of the year with football and basketball and golf and all these other things, and you're traveling all the time." And I just thought, are you crazy? It's the Red Sox. Yeah. What play-by-play person in America, wouldn't be thrilled and honored to be asked to be one of the announcers for the Red Sox? And then Joe Castiglione, who's done the games now for almost 40 years on the radio, is a legendary guy. He's a really good friend of mine, a wonderful guy, and that was fun. Got to know Will Fleming very well, who was with us last year doing updates. And if we play this year, we'll be more involved with play-by-play and still doing updates. And he's awesome. So it was really fun. So when they called me again at the end of the year and said, "Hey, would you like to come back next year?" Absolutely. So hopefully there's going to be a next year.
Yeah. A lot easier of a decision to make as far as going back to the Red Sox than it was deciding between missing the World Series and going to the wedding, I would assume.
Right. Well, last year I did 30 games, and then they talked to me about doing more. And I wanted to do a few more, but, part of it is you do want to enjoy your summer and that sort of thing, especially when you're busy in the fall and winter. So I said to them, "How about if I do 40 games?" And they said, "Well, how about 60? I said, "Well, how about 40? So I didn't realize when I said 40 that it was going to be 2/3 of the schedule now, but I'm eager to do it. I'm really just kind of itching to do anything. I've been basically sitting around for more than 3 months now, hoping that we'd have some sort of sport to call. I think I've been getting my fix about competition. I've become a watcher of the Game Show Network, which as of a couple of months ago, I didn't even know existed. So, but now maybe it's just to watch people compete against each other or teams compete against each other. And I find myself stopping and watching it. So just anxious to get back and do something. Sean, and I think it'd be great for America when we start playing. I just hope that they are able to execute it safely so that, we don't have large numbers of the participants getting sick, and then that would be obviously a disaster. And I think you go back to your original question about the college teams. I think if there's any concern that this is going to be, I think you anticipate if you try to play that there might be cases, people who might get it from not even being around sports, have it outside, but now come into a team environment. You got to obviously mitigate that as best you can. But if this is going to be widespread instances of people making each other sick, then sports is not that important in the grand scheme of things.
Of course.
Right. Wanted to talk a little college hoops with you. And one of the games that you've called that's one of the greatest games ever is the Syracuse-UConn 6 overtime games. I just wanted to ask you what it was like calling a game that went to 6 overtimes, and more importantly, what was it like spending all that time with Bill Raftery and Jay Billis?
Well, I would say at Bill's age, you'd be worried about him dozing off to sleep at that hour of the night. But as you two probably know, I'm sure you know, he actually stays awake later than most people, significantly younger than his age, for a variety of reasons. Social time, we'll call it. But it was, especially now during all this stuff that we've been talking about, the pandemic, with all these networks playing classic games over and over and over again. It's been fun to see that one pop up a few times. And then friends of mine, like Danny, will reach out to me and say, hey, the game is on, or whatever. So it's kind of reinforced how lucky I've been to be in the right place at the right time in a number of instances where games like that have broken out. But obviously it gets to overtime, you think, okay, it's been a good game, it's an overtime game. But as each overtime went along, we all realized we were watching something really special. And to have it be 6 overtime games, one of the longest in the history of college basketball, and then have it be in Madison Square Garden. At the time, Syracuse and Connecticut were great rivals. I think both coaches were already in the Hall of Fame. Calhoun and Boeheim, they kind of had their own rivalry. So, and then everything that went into making it a great game. To me, I've said many times in talking about it that the most interesting thing out of lots of incredible things that happened was Syracuse was never ahead in any of the first 5 overtimes, not even for 1 point, by 1 point, for 1 second. They were either tied or behind, tied or behind, tied or behind. And in the first 5, managed somehow to get it to the next overtime. And then in the 6th overtime, obviously, they finally took the lead and won the game. But tremendous number of great plays, some terrific individual performances, guys getting into the game who you never thought would come close to getting into the game and then are really important down the stretch. I thought it was a wonderfully officiated game, which, was part of what made it a classic. You almost didn't notice them, which to be out there for that long says a lot too. So, yeah, it was interesting. And as Bill Raftery said, famously, it's the only time he ever got home from New York City after 3 a.m. and his wife wasn't mad at him. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. And to do it with Jay and Bill, I mean, the game was great, but I was really proud of the broadcast. I thought from a producing, directing, graphics, camera work, everything that goes into a TV production. It won the award. I think it was the National Association of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences gives out an award for the best live sports broadcast of the year, and that won it. And it, obviously the game had a lot to do with it, but it was one of those times where you kind of felt like the production was worthy of it too. I think everybody involved, with myself perhaps being the exception, was up to the moment. And sometimes that doesn't happen. You can have a great game, but you feel like, wow, the TV show was a little sloppy or whatever. Or you can have an unbelievable television production, but it was a 42-3 football game and nobody noticed. So that was one of those nights where it just kind of all came together.
Now I know when I'm calling a baseball game or something and it's already in inning 10 or 11, I'm already reaching for an extra bottle of water or an extra cough drop. How many waters did you crush? Teas did you drink?
Well, that's the problem, because you don't have time to go to the restroom. And, you keep crushing waters, which is the best thing you can do for your voice. Hydration is the key for vocal cords, and water is really the best thing. So, especially when you get to my age and Billis's age and Raftery's age, although this was, 12 years ago? Over a decade ago. We were all considerably younger then. But, no, I mean, I just, I think the biggest thing that I got concerned about as went along is losing your voice. Because we had already done a game earlier that night. It was a doubleheader. That's the other thing that you always wondered about,
I forgot about that.
That's why I got over at 1:30 in the morning. It was 3.5 hours, but it started at 9 something, whatever it was. So, but you wondered, what if this was the first game? Would they have played the second game? They sent them out there at 11:30 at night. I guess they would have, right? They probably wouldn't have any choice. But
and then Syracuse played overtime game the next night, right? In the championship.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost cruel,
Yeah,
it was
right.
part of their story. The funny thing was when they made the announcement. We talked a moment ago about so many things about it that you'll never forget. They made the announcement. Those of you who came here on the subway, on the train. the last train is, leaving at whatever, 12:30 or something. And nobody got up and left. Matter of fact, a lot of people booed, like, boo, we'll find our way back to the suburbs or something, but nobody was going to leave. Bob Costas has told the story a bunch of times. He called me the next morning and he said, hey, I just wanted to call. What a game. Blah, blah, blah. He said, I have to tell you a story. I'm in Hawaii. We go back to Hawaii. He was with his wife, and they had a reservation to go to a restaurant that was known for its sunset. So he's getting dressed. He's watching the game. Of course, he's a Syracuse grad, so he had a little more interest in it than anybody. But I think anybody, even people who weren't Syracuse or UConn people, got caught up. And I had so many texts from friends of mine said I had no rooting interest in this game, but I couldn't stop watching it. It was one of those things. But Bob said, so we're getting dressed, and I said, honey, why don't you call a restaurant, see if they can slide us back 15 minutes, So he called, honey, why don't you call again and see if they can slide us back another 15 minutes. So by the third or fourth time, she says, we're going to miss the sunset. We'll go tomorrow night. I have to see the end of the game. So I think a lot of people had that kind of experience with it.
Do you think that's the craziest game that you've ever called, would you say?
Yeah, I mean,
is there anything that's even a close second?
What's that? I'm sorry, Joseph.
Is there anything that might be a close second? Might be the better question.
Well, I mean, I think it was for that prolonged a period of time. I mean, you have things that, like the end of the Michigan State football game a few years ago when Michigan botched the punt. That was a wild ending. It was, dramatic because it was the last play of the game, and it was two premier schools rivalry. Obviously, it's spirited in-state rivalry, and Jim Harbaugh was still relatively new. There was a lot that went into it, but that wasn't the whole game. I mean, the 6 overtimes, it was just back and forth, and as I said, guys making great plays, guys making really bad plays. Missing layups and dunks, but then coming back and doing something equally outstanding. So. I just think for something of that duration, there are a few things that I've seen that compare to it. I think it's one of the great games in college basketball history. And as I said, it was magnified because of who it was and where it was, and that it was in the Big East tournament, which already had 3 decades, wherever it was, of a pretty proud history and tradition. So yeah, it was. Especially now with everybody's doing podcasts and lists of the top 10, this, that, or other thing, great games, greatest players. And I, right before all this happened, I got asked to speak at the Cronkite School here at Arizona State to a sports broadcasting class. And the professor said, could you make a list of what you think maybe are like the top 10 moments or games that you've done? And when I sat around, it was harder than I thought, because you start to remember, well, wait a minute, that was really a great game too, or that was really exciting. So, but SU-UConn, that game would be, at or near the top of the list. The 1992 Game 7 of the National League Championship Series, Sid Bream and the Braves and the Pirates, and Bob Costas did a series on MLB Network, the greatest games of all time, and I think that was number 4 in Major League Baseball history. So. To be there for that. And that was pretty, especially the ending of that, the bottom of the 9th, that was pretty wild. You guys probably weren't even close to being alive yet, but you can watch it. It's on all the time now during.
Yeah, no, I've seen it.
If you haven't seen it, you should, because it really was one of the great baseball games of all time.
Now, those are some of the craziest games you said you've called or been a part of. Do you have a favorite call?
No, not really. It is the fun part of it, though, and one of the fun parts of it. As I said, if you get around long enough, especially, you're lucky that you wind up in a few places where something really exciting happens. And to me, the fun part of it is it's live. You don't get to do it over again. You don't get to go back and edit it. It's either you say the right things in the right tone, or you nail it, or you don't. So, I guess what I'm happy about is, in most of those big moments, I feel like I got it right. I mean, the Michigan State thing, my voice was cracking all over the place. And, but, at the beginning, I was sort of, what happened? I'd been a little sick that week, but still. But then, but I think it matched the moment. I think that's the most important thing in any call of a big play. Sometimes students will ask me, what's your mindset of calling a big play? Or like, you can't have a mindset. You just go with it instinctively. You're sitting there thinking, oh, wait a minute. he just dropped the snap and now something crazy is going to happen. And, oh, this is an exciting play. So I better, yell more or whatever, pick some fancy word. But, the play is over by the time you process all that in your own mind. So, I think the most important thing is just instinctively go with it in every way, in what you say and how you say it, the volume at which you say it. So, I think that the call of that hopefully helped people remember it, and I don't mean to be immodest about it, but I do think that's a part of when people look back on that play. It's one of the reasons why they think about it, is me sounding like I was 12 and about to start shaving sometime in the next few years.
The three things I remember most about that was your call, the kid in the stands that they immediately
the surrender cobra.
The surrender cobra, yep. That and then the play
Michigan
itself.
guy, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, that's another lesson too of another reason why I felt good about it was once you call the play, my philosophy has always been on TV, stop talking. Once you called the moment, okay, they win the game, you've just said everything you need to say, stop. Because there's nothing that you can say that's better than the pictures. And the example you both remember vividly is the reason why. And if I have been talking over that, what can you say that's better than that shot? And all the other reaction shots and the noise and the people hugging each other and the Michigan State people going crazy and the Michigan people stunned. So, I don't know how long we went without speaking, but I know it was a long time. And it probably would have been longer, but at a certain point, especially when you're in these windows, sometimes, they're trying to get to the next game too, so you can't sit there forever.
Now, before we get into our two fun segments that we like to send our guests off with.
This hasn't been fun so far. I'm having a great time.
Even more fun.
What I've had in 3 months. The first thing I've done in 3 months.
PJ and I both wanted to know, and this might be a tough one, so if you got multiple players you want to name, by all means. But who do you believe is the most captivating, entertaining athlete you've had the chance to cover?
Wow. Captivating and entertaining. But not so that would also infer that they need to be a great player too. I mean, you could be a really funny, interesting person.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't cover this guy. The most charismatic person I've ever met in sports was Ted Williams. You guys, again, I don't think would have been alive at the '99 All-Star game. It was probably close.
I was 1.
Yeah, I was 3.
There you go. But it was it was at Fenway Park, and Ted Williams was there, and just to see the way that the players of that time, the All-Stars of '99, responded to him. But he was just a guy who filled up the room. And especially when you knew the history. I was when he passed away, they had a memorial service for him in Fenway Park, and I was asked to be one of the hosts of it, I guess you would call it, and MCs of it. And we sat in the middle of the field, and we interviewed a lot of people who knew him well and were close to him. And one of the people was John Glenn, who at the time was a senator from Ohio, but had been an astronaut, obviously, and one of the most important people in the history of the space program. And he and Ted Williams had served together as fighter pilots in the military. And so, he said, Ted Williams was the best pilot I was ever around. Most people thought, he's referred to as the greatest hitter that ever lived. People who have fished with him would say he might have been the greatest fisherman in the world. He was just one of those guys.
Yeah.
But he had a manner of speaking, when he talked to you, you just, he was interested in every single thing. I said I never really covered him, but spent a little bit of time around him, and that would certainly jump out. Are we getting the time? We're
good. We got 10. We got 10 to go.
Okay. Well, I'll try to give shorter answers though.
we're good.
Captivated, well, I'm biased. Again, I didn't really cover him, but in today's world, to me, there's nobody more captivating and entertaining than Charles Barkley. I didn't really cover games when he played, but he's amazing. I've got this picture over my shoulders from my charity golf tournament. That's Bill Murray. But Charles has come the last 2 years, and when Bill Murray and Charles Barkley are at the event, it's going to be
laughs. Yeah.
You talk about captivating and entertaining. That's it.
All right, those two segments we teased. The first one we call it the Swift 7. 7 rapid fire questions.
Okay, I'll try to be much more rapid fire. Brevity is not one of my strong suits, but, especially on a podcast. Usually these things go on for days. I pack a lunch, so knowing that we have the shot clock here is a little intimidating, but I'll do the best I can.
All right, let's dive into it then. Favorite arena, stadium / ballpark you ever been to?
Fenway Park.
Figured that would be an easy one. What's the one venue you've never been to but you have wanted to go to?
Oh, wow. You got this is great stuff. These are great questions. The one venue I've never been to but wanted to. You know why that's hard? Because I think I've been to every single one of them.
That's awesome.
I really don't know. Can we come back to that?
Sure.
Yeah, we'll circle back.
Yeah.
In an alternate universe where March Madness 2020 took place, your pick would have been?
I was leaning heavily toward Florida State, which I think I don't think they would have been one of the top picks in Vegas, but I loved their team. Deep, could shoot, could defend, great foul shooting team, which I think is really important in the tournament. I feel terrible for them, especially for Leonard Hamilton. He's had a lot of really good teams. I think this might have been his best team, and they had a chance to really do something special, and obviously it was taken away from them.
Favorite non-sports related pastime?
Well, that would take golf out of the question. Favorite non-sports related. This is going to make me look like the narrow human being. I mean, the other thing I was going to say, well, boating, but that's sort of sports related, I guess. Working out, although you wouldn't know it looking at me, that's sort of sports related. So I don't know.
I don't have anything for that either. I just watch Netflix from time to time.
Yeah, well, you know what though? This whole thing, we've referenced it several times. I've said for decades to friends of mine, like, what do people who don't like sports do?
Yeah.
How do they fill up their time?
It's a great question.
Now that we don't have sports to fill up our time, I really, really wonder that now. I mean, as much as I miss doing games, I miss even more watching games, because for most of this 3 months, I wouldn't have been doing games, but in a lot of my spare time, I would have been watching games.
If you could choose,
I'm still in the back of my mind trying to figure out the venue that I want to go to.
We'll come back to that one. If you could choose only one golf course to go back to and see one more time, would it be Pebble Beach, Augusta, or St. Andrews?
Wow. Any of the above really would be awesome.
Yeah.
I'd say St. Andrews because it's the only one of the three that I haven't had the chance to play. I've done a few British Opens there between men and women, but the Open Championships, I should say. But never had a chance to play it. And that whole experience with the town, the whole setting there is really cool.
Favorite event that you've ever gotten a call?
Ooh. Being a passionate golfer, I'd have to say the Masters.
Good choice.
Although the World Series that was pretty good too.
Yeah. Favorite city that you've ever been to?
Oh boy, anywhere in the world?
Anywhere in the world.
Oh boy. Well, outside of Boston, of course.
Right.
Yeah, because I used to come on there and say, "Welcome, to Fenway Park in America's greatest city," and people say, "Oh, you're so provincial." I'm like, "No, I mean it. I mean, it's." Well, last summer had a chance to go to Rome and London, and either one of those are pretty cool. I've never been to Paris.
Okay.
So that's one that's on the list. We were actually supposed to go to China in March, and a trip that was planned since last fall. So no, obviously that did not happen.
Yes.
And then, have you thought about the venue that you haven't been to that you want to
go to? I have, and I still don't have a great answer. I tell you what, it was amazing going to London last summer was Wimbledon.
There you go.
That's high on my list. Yep.
Yeah, but now I've been there. I was actually there when I was, I think, 12 or 13 years old. I barely remember it, but it was really cool. Let me think of a good answer to that. It's time for part 2 of our podcast next week. But I'm trying to think if there's any place. No, I really can't. I mean, I would have said the Roman Coliseum, right? But then I was there last summer, so that's
hey, Wimbledon's up on my list. That's
well, I want to go to Australia, so I would say, maybe like the Rod Laver Stadium.
There you go. That works.
That was really cool too. I grew up as a tennis player.
Mm-hmm.
I played junior tennis around New England, played in the all the little tournaments and stuff. And my idol was Rod Laver. I just loved Rod Laver. And we were in the hotel after having been at Wimbledon during the day. And I looked over, I said to a couple of my friends, I think that's Rod Laver. And they said, yes, it is Rod Laver. So I just asked the maitre d' if we could send him a drink in his party. And he came back and he said, they're very appreciative, but they're just about to leave. But Mr. Labor said, please come over and say hello. So
Wow.
I went over and said hello, and he could not have been nicer. Really, really cool guy. We actually sat for quite a while. So, even though I've been doing this for 100 years, there are still people like that where you meet where you think, wow, this is really cool. He was exceptionally cool. When you meet, I said this to him, when you meet somebody you've idolized since you were a young kid and they turn out to be even nicer than you had hoped, that's pretty cool.
That is. All right, and so that was the first part of our fun segment. The second part, we like
3.5 minutes.
We like to do a trivia question with all our guests, all right? So we found a baseball trivia question for you. We'll give you 90 seconds or 3 strikes.
Can I phone a friend?
No.
Cannot.
That's it. Hey, Tim Kirchin got
I
his
know
wrong.
Costas will know the answer within 3 seconds, no matter what the question is. So.
Tim Kirchin missed his, so if you get this, you can hold it.
Okay, well then, no pressure.
No pressure. Your
Coffee's
question.
giving me a runny nose, though, so I'm struggling.
Your question, Sean McDonough, who led the major leagues in home run in the 2010? So this past decade from 2010 to 2019. Who led the major league in home runs?
Do you need to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead. If you know the answer.
No. It sounds like when you get a phone call.
Oh, no, you're good.
Oh, I thought maybe we were taking live calls now. That was my phone a friend. I should know this. I'm terrible at stuff like this. Somebody who's had to play most of the decade. Jose Batista.
No, but that's a good guess. You're on the right track.
Josh Donaldson.
No.
Right, 2.
I was on the right track. Why was I
like that caliber of player? Not really a superstar, but a good, solid veteran player.
TJ, when did we start giving hints?
That's
he said he wasn't good at this, so I'm trying.
I'm not good at this. Can I get another hint?
He right now. Let's see. He
Multiple teams.
Without giving it away.
Was with multiple teams.
Multiple teams.
I don't know.
The answer is Nelson Cruz.
Oh, yeah. That would have taken me a while. But you're right. Better player than he gets credit for being.
Definitely.
In part because he's, played in kind of smaller markets that don't get a lot of attention. At least markets don't get as much attention.
No
Very good player. Very good home run hitter.
Very good.
We cannot thank you enough for giving us your time today. We hope that you're healthy.
We have a minute and a half left. Why am I getting the bum's rush here?
What else you want to talk about? Any good stories
that's good.
before we kick us out?
No, that was really good. What stadium is that over your shoulder there?
It's just a nice, wall picture thing.
Fake backdrop of anything?
Exactly. Nothing. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Nice. Well, I enjoyed it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
You're
Sean.
an Alabama person.
I am, yes. Joe's a Maryland guy. So
Mm-hmm.
I was bummed you didn't say Maryland instead of FSU.
Either one of you got into Syracuse?
I got in. I'm sorry I chose Maryland.
What?
Sorry.
Maryland's a great school. And I'm sure Alabama was fun.
It was. You've called many of their games.
I sure have, and hope to call a few more sooner rather than later. Let's hope.
Let's hope so. Well, thank you, Sean. Have a good
Thank you, guys. I
rest of
really
your
enjoyed
week.
it. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
That was the great Sean McDonough of ESPN, also calls some radio games for the Red Sox. And how happy must he be now that he gets to return to Fenway?
Incredible.
He told us he's going to do about 40 games. So
yeah, I remember last year he did, like he was mentioning, just like a partial part of it. But like he said, he agreed to 40 games. Little did he know 40 games would be 2/3 of the season. So good for him.
For Sean, yeah, that he gets all that work. I love, too, that when we asked him what the venue that he hasn't been to yet that he wants to get to, and he says, well, I've been everywhere, honestly.
Look, if you think about it, a guy of his ilk who's been around the block as much as he has, who does as much as he does, did the Monday Night Football for a while, does college football's biggest games every week.
He's done everything.
Does the marquee matchup of college basketball every week. So he goes, as far as college venues, he's at all the top ones every week.
Sure.
As far as the NFL goes, he's been to probably every NFL stadium at this point. So he did the Red Sox for
same thing every season.
Did the Red Sox for 2 decades. He had to have been to every stadium. So really, there isn't much left. But I love the Rod Laver story was good. And I loved his like I was like getting choked up about it. His Hawaii story, with the rainbow and everything. That was I said it after we had Joe Beninati on. Play-by-play guys, the best storytellers, just because obviously it's their profession to talk, and just they see things from such a unique perspective. They're around so many sports. They're always around these events. So many stories to tell, and
you just give them a question and they run with it.
That's it.
We were just expecting to talk Red Sox 04, the Yankees series, that
Of
team,
course.
and then he gives us the Hawaii story, and we're like,
exactly.
absolutely.
And sometimes like that, you just get lucky in an interview. Like I know we were like ready to pivot to the next thing, and then he whips that out, and it's just like you just sit back there and listen in awe of some of the stories. And he got us both with that whole Syracuse thing in the end. I felt bad. Like I felt bad to tell him that I got in but picked against it. I feel like he hates me now. But
well, one of the things that he's best known for, of course, is college football. Calls the college football playoff every year. We know the news that came out about Clemson and LSU. Joe, it seems like college football, and really football in general, has been on this roller coaster. March and April, it didn't look so good. You didn't know if they were going to play. Then maybe a couple weeks ago, NCAA comes out, and they're like, teams can have these voluntary workouts. They have this plan in place. But then this news comes out of Clemson and LSU, two big-time programs, two teams that were just in the championship game. So after hearing that, what are your thoughts now about the season?
So to pull back the curtain, again, we've mentioned that we record on Zoom. So when Sean was mentioning, we got a shot clock warning up here, for a meeting of three or more, there's a countdown clock.
Yeah.
You only got 40 minutes, and we haven't. Two guys out of work right now during a pandemic, we haven't sprung to pay for the upgraded Zoom. So I'm glad he had fun with that, and I bring that up because, to me, I look at college football in the same way right now. College football is on a countdown clock. They don't have much time to work with. It's already June 24th. Having worked with Maryland football the last 4 years, report date it's right around now for workouts, and for training camp, day 1 of August or like towards the last week of July. So they're under the gun, and they have all these positive tests now, which make you wonder, will they be able to start when they have to? And it's not quite like the NFL where, okay, if there's a delay, we push it back. They're students, and if some of them graduate in December or have to start getting ready for the next NFL season, so you can't really then take the college football season and push it back too far. So you figure they've got to start by a certain point if they don't want to cut out certain games, and it's now the end of June, and they have all these positive tests. And on top of all of that, for the NFL, at least you're getting paid. You have it's going to be up to the players if they want to still go and fulfill their contracts and take the risk. The college players aren't getting paid, so the schools and the coaches aren't really in a position to force them to do anything. So there's a whole lot of things going on. They've got that sort of countdown, trying to beat the clock now because they can't really push their season back the way the NFL can. They don't have players who are getting paid to really make that sort of decision like the NFL players. And you have all these positive tests, and there's just a lot going on in college. I haven't really thought about it much until we talked to Sean because we were so focused on baseball and the NHL and NBA. But now that all three of those have their affairs in order, your mind does go to college football. And it's a big worry. I don't really have a percentage to give you one way or the other like we had when Tim was on a few weeks ago as far as 60-40 confidence in baseball. I don't have anything right now for college football because there's so many variables. And then you also have, will certain Power 5 conferences mandate their own season?
Yeah, just go rogue.
And see that the Bama poster up to your left shoulder, the big Bama guy you are, the mayor of Tuscaloosa came out and said that the city stands to lose $2 billion in revenue if there's no season. So will they go rogue and have their own SEC season if the MAC doesn't play, and if there's teams that decide not to play from like the ACC or whatever, like will the big teams still have their own season? There's too many variables, I feel like, in college to really start thinking about it yet. And while teams are questioning whether they'll play, you got Ohio State that wants to have 25% capacity in their stadium. So there's too much going on to really give a straight answer right now. But I don't feel good. And
you talked about how these players aren't getting paid. I also just go back to the fact that they're student athletes. So they're students first. This isn't like the NFL where they're professionals. This is how they make their living. You got to look after their health, their well-being first. They're going to take precaution. As of right now, if I still had to lean towards an answer, I think they're going to play without fans. I think it may be a week or two later. But yeah, it's just so tough because there's so many colleges.
The optics
of all over the country.
If you don't have students on campus, but these student athletes are okay to come there and do stuff. So, my brother goes to Rutgers, and he was reading some things about whether he's going to be able to go back in the fall or not. And apparently Rutgers hasn't really budgeted it out to have people back in the fall. So people are starting to wonder if Rutgers is planning on having students in person in the fall. So if Rutgers doesn't have students in person, how can they then justify having a football program there and playing games? So there's just so many issues with optics too. I don't know. It's still far away, but it's also getting a lot closer. It's that object. It's that object in the rearview mirror.
Right.
That, you know how it says objects in mirror are closer than they appear. It's starting to get a lot closer than it appears. And I don't know. There's a lot of questions to be answered.
And you had the news about Clemson and LSU. Then you had Fauci come out and say that football was going to be really hard to play. And it's just kind of this perfect storm of now with baseball coming back and NHL and NBA having their return to play proposals. It's kind of putting this pressure on football. You bring up Alabama, not only in the SEC, there are so many schools that rely on money from the football program. Think about all those teams who come up to play these schools during their cupcake weeks. They get paid $1 million by these schools, and they rely on that money for their athletic program, and they're not going to be able to get that if there's no season. There's so many trickle-down effects, like you said. There's so many optics. That
yearly game against the Citadel,
Right. I mean, you got all these teams over the country. You got travel. It's going to be tough. I'm still holding out hope that they find a way to play, but
I don't know. A quick note, you mentioned Dr. Fauci. If anybody gets a chance to go find, I don't know if it's posted online anywhere, but Dr. Fauci had an interview with Michael Kay, Don LaGreca, and Peter Rosenberg of ESPN New York this past week. I guess it was Monday. And he said he went for like a half an hour, and he in the interview, Fauci said, whenever these other networks, news networks and stuff, have asked me about sports, it's been taken so out of context and doesn't paint the whole picture. So to what you said about football being hard to play, he came out and he clarified that, and he said, I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm just saying, of the sports, football is the one that they're going to have to figure out a plan. And he said, the plans he's seen, he said they made sense, but it's just a matter of it being tougher to plan because of the contact and because of there being so many more guys. So he hasn't said it's impossible, but again, you try to start looking at how, or listening to how someone says something rather than what exactly they're saying. And the tone around him and others as they talk about football, it's with a hint of trepidation and doubt because of the just glut of players that are there. You've got 80, 90 guys who have to be there between players and then their position coaches. So a lot of moving parts. But again, if they can have some sort of bubble plan in place, could it work? And we don't know the answer to that. So we're just going to have to kind of wait and see. It's all above our heads, the medical side of it.
Yep. And we talk about the coronavirus from college football to golf, and the big story today as we record this on Wednesday is Brooks Koepka dropping out of the Travelers Championship. His caddy tested positive for it. Graham McDowell, another player who tested positive for the coronavirus as well. And you just wonder how many – I think golf's coming out. The commissioner is coming
Did he
out.
test positive, or was it his caddy as well, Graham McDowell?
What is it, his caddy? I'm not sure about that.
I'm not sure about that. But Daniel Berger also withdrew. He's been scorching hot. He didn't really give a reason. So, but, putting two and two together, you can guess that might have played a factor. But it's so far, golf seems to have handled things well, at least, as far as getting a positive test, pulling the guy out. Nick Watney tested positive, pulled right out. There were some questions, though, about the way they handled the people who they were able to contact trace Nick Watney to. Like, he was in contact with Koepka, he was in contact with Sergio Garcia, and they finished their rounds this past weekend. But they did test negative. But then again, you get the medical questions about, well, some doctors believe that it's got a 2 or 3 day period before it comes up as a positive test. Mm-hmm. So if they tested these guys on Friday after Watney tested it on Thursday, they probably shouldn't have played Saturday and Sunday because you might not get an accurate reading until Monday as far as whether you could tell from the viral load and stuff. So there's so many questions to be answered. But optics-wise, like, the PGA Tour has seemed to do a good job of handling what's been thrown at them so far.
So with Koepka dropping out, he's one of the biggest names in the sport, was going to be a popular pick this weekend at the Travelers Championship. I know you bet him last week at the
did.
RBC Heritage. He was
It's so
right
close.
there. He was close to
Great
making
tournament.
a Sunday run.
Great tournament. I mean, the low scores. I think the the previous record was 19 under, and you had 4 or 5 guys who got to 20. So records shattered at that course, and just the soft conditions played a factor in that. But Koepka, I put after his Thursday round, I liked the way he looked. I felt confident. Midway through his Thursday round, I liked the way he looked. So I hit him on the live line at like plus 2,700. I dropped $5 on it to win 140, just something small and stupid. And he almost came through for me, so it would have been nice. But you mentioned as far as this week goes, I was going down the list trying to make my picks. My original pick was going to be Koepka. Gone. Mm-hmm. My backup pick was going to be Daniel Berger, withdrew a couple of days ago. So I'm down to number 3 in the batting order. Yeah. And I'm going to go with your boy Justin Thomas, because plenty of guys made runs on Sunday at the RBC Heritage, and he was one of them. Got himself into a tie atop the leaderboard after kind of meandering around the first couple of days, and he seems hot. And I just got to go again. This week I'm just taking a stab at him because my top 2 guys are not playing anymore. Koepka, I love the way he played. Thought this course set up well for him. God, Berger, scorching hot, continued his rounds under par streak, and he was a runner-up here a few years ago when he lost to Jordan Spieth in a playoff. Gone. So I'm just going with Justin Thomas this week.
I'm nothing wrong with that. He's pretty good. I this week I'm rolling with Bubba Watson, 3-time winner at the Travelers Championship. If you know Bubba, you know that there are certain courses that he plays really bad at, and there are certain courses that he plays really well at. And the Travelers is one of those places. Augusta, obviously, being another. The past 2 weeks, too, Bubba has made the cut. He's played some pretty good rounds.
He finished 9 under, I believe, on Sunday.
Yeah, and he just he loves the Travelers Championship, and with so many big names in the field, I feel like his name will get lost in the shuffle. And I'm rolling with Bubba this week. I think he can
get some
win
good value on him too. Justin Thomas is 12-1. What was
I did not look up Bubba's odds, but I gotta imagine he's 25, 30-1, something around there.
All right, transition us into our little fun. Where would you go, Joe? And I'll look up the odds in the meantime for you.
Sounds good. All right. So while you got an eye on that,
actually, didn't have to go that down too far.
Nice.
He is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. He is 14th in odds at plus 3,300. So 33-1.
Yeah, good value.
Not bad.
So I like Bubba this week. Where would you go, Joe? June 25th. Again, we're a little bit too early for late Wimbledon, not too early for World Cup. NBA Finals pretty much ending, although I did get an NBA Finals in there. So
I was surprised to see that one.
Yes.
I have to go back and look why it was so late in this season.
So I'll read you off the 4 choices. Answer choice A is the NBA Finals in 1999, Game 5 between the Spurs and the Knicks, with the Spurs up 3-1. You have answer choice B, 1994, Yankees at Indians. Indians are riding a 17-game home streak, trying to throw some baseball in there. And you had to feel with the Yankees in town and with the Indians being that good at home, probably a good environment to be at. Answer choice C, 1991, Martina Navratilova beats Elna Rynak at Wimbledon for her 100th career victory. So not only do you get to attend Wimbledon, but you also get a little piece of history. And then answer choice D is 1988 Euro final between the Netherlands and the Soviet Union in Germany.
Okay, this is a good list. I liked last week's. We had some unique ones. I went with the Women's World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
That first final. I don't want to go soccer 2 weeks in a row. And Euro final, as big as the Euro is, it's not a World Cup. So I'll check that one off the list. Wimbledon, really want to get there at some point in my life.
Yep.
But this, as far as, I don't know, this one doesn't really kind of jump out at me. I don't even know who the person that Navratilova beat was. Did not hear that name before. So I know
hopefully I pronounced it right.
I know you're there for Navratilova's 100th win and just being at Wimbledon, but I'll put that one aside. The Indians winning streak, fun little note there, that big of a winning streak, but doesn't really do it for me. I know, and maybe I'm biased because I know how Game 5 of this 99 finals ended up. It ends up with a trophy lift for the Spurs.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm biased because of that, but it's got to be that. Always, always, always I look at if a trophy is lifted, and being from the New York area, I've seen specials on MSG and whatnot of this finals before, and just obviously knowing the history of the game, I know that they lifted the title that night. Popovich, Robinson, and Duncan. This was kind of Duncan's coronation as far as taking the torch from the Admiral, and he won the Finals MVP. So I go with choice A, 1999 NBA Finals Game 5. Spurs beat the Knicks.
I think that's a good choice. I was in between that and Wimbledon, but
Wimbledon's great.
But I think just because it was such an early matchup in the round, and like you said, you get the NBA Finals, I think you have to lean towards the NBA Finals. And that leaves us with our last segment, as always.
We are
which is
1-1.
1-1. And because we had Sean McDonough this week, who is tied to multiple sports, I have no idea what sport you're choosing for me, but I'm excited.
We talked about this beforehand. We could have gone 3 ways: baseball, college football, college basketball.
Correct.
I chose baseball for you.
Okay.
Because it's kind of I'll ask you my question first. Kind of ties in. We're having a short season, 60 games. Last time a season didn't go the full 162 was the 94 season, when the strike did not allow them to play a World Series after they were more than, I guess, 3/4 of the way done with the season. What I want you to answer, and this also ties into one of Tim Kirchin's daily baseball fixes that he's been doing. So if you've been watching those, you should get the answer. But in that 94 season, they still awarded MVP awards. Who were the MVPs that season? Let me get your no, give me both. I was going to be nice and say give me one, but both. Who were the All right, fine. It's before you were born. Give me one of the 2 MVPs. One of the 2 MVPs.
I can give you both. Not saying
I'll
give you one, but
true.
I'll do the challenge.
I'll start the clock now. The MVPs from the 1994 season.
I don't even know who won the World Series in '94.
There wasn't. That's the thing. That's what I'm saying. That was the last shortened season. That was the last. That's why I looked there, because that was the last season that didn't go to 162.
Got you. Oof.
20 seconds in.
Let's see, mid-90s. So the Yankees were good. The Blue Jays, they had won the World Series previously.
A minute remaining.
I'll go A-Rod.
It was not A-Rod. Strike one.
Ripken didn't win it that year. It's a little too early for Griffey. McGuire.
40 seconds remaining.
Man, it's just mid-90s. I'm not thinking of enough guys. Let's see. Maybe it was a Bonds?
No, 2 strikes.
I think if it was like a pitcher, like Clemens or
15
Randy
seconds.
Oof. I'll go Randy Johnson.
No.
Oh,
Good.
You got me.
I didn't want to go too hard. I thought it was reasonable, especially if I only made you give me one of them, because the ESPN made a big deal about this a couple of weeks ago with nothing else really to talk about. So on this date, they were talking about it because it also coincided with Tim Kirchin's daily baseball fix. Jeff Bagwell and Frank Thomas would be the answer. And the reason that's significant and why it was all over ESPN on May 27th, and in Tim Kirchin's statistical quirk coincidence baseball episode, they were both born on May 27th, 1968, same day, same year, and both won their lone MVPs in the 1994 season. So that's why it was all over ESPN and Kirchin's feed. So I thought it was hard because it was mid-90s before we were born.
Yeah.
But it's been a topic of conversation during quarantine, so I thought it was fair. I'm sorry if it was too hard.
All good. No, I mean, Bagwell and Thomas, obviously, I've heard of, but that was good. I was not thinking that.
It was just tie-in because
that was
I know
solid.
That on May 27th they talked about it.
Mine for you is college football, but it's not really statistical. All right, it's a funky question, but I think you'll enjoy it. So there are 5 teams in Power 5 Division I, not including Notre Dame. All right,
okay.
College football, Power 5 Division I. There are 5 teams whose mascot do not end in the letter S.
Oh.
All right. So you let me know when you're ready. Think about that for a
All
little
5?
bit. All
God,
5.
that's like 200 teams, Pete.
A little bit. Yep.
All right. Let's go for it.
All right. So here we go. Go ahead.
Okay. Gosh. 200 something teams, and there's 5 needles in this haystack. And it's funny because when we do like Sporkle quizzes, I get through the college mascot quiz in a second. Oh, everybody that I'm thinking of has an S.
30 seconds.
Geez.
Maybe 5 was too hard because I figured once you get in a conference, you might get a couple and then you get rolling.
And that's what I'm trying to think through. Syracuse
is one. There you go.
Okay. Got that. Got
50
Cuse.
seconds. So 40 left.
Yeah. Gosh, this is a good question. Cuse is the only one that comes to mind, the orange. Thinking through the Big Ten, where I'm from. Illinois.
Illinois, Fighting
That's
Illini.
2.
Very good, too. You got 20 seconds left. 5 was probably too many. I should have given you.
Right.
If you can get one more in 15 seconds, I'll give it to you.
All right.
10 seconds. 5 seconds.
Does North Dakota count the Bison?
They do not. All right, time is up. Joe, you're going to kick yourself. What's that behind me?
Oh, my God. The answer was literally right in front of my face. The Alabama Crimson Tide. You got to be kidding me. Good.
It was Bama, Illinois, Syracuse. The tough one is Stanford because they're the Cardinal.
Gotcha.
And then NC State Wolfpack.
Good question. You know what?
Thank you. 5 was tough, but 3, I would have given it to you.
If I would have had, a couple minutes thinking through all the conferences, because I think my mistake was I started in the ACC, got them, went to the Big Ten, got Illinois, and then I went. Here was my problem. You had an SEC with Bama, you had a Pac-12 with Stanford. I went to the Big 12 next. Because my friend goes to Baylor, so I went there next, and it just screwed me up with the time. Good question, though. I like that.
So, with Sean, he's got so many. I figured I'd kind of give you a funky one relating to college football. So, there you go.
I like that. Well, we're starting to get the ball rolling here. When we started this podcast, no leagues had any plan in place yet. Very quickly, by the second episode, the NHL got theirs. By the third, the NBA had theirs. Now, by the 5th, the MLB has a plan. So the light is getting brighter at the end of the tunnel.
It is.
We just hope that everything can follow through. We've had UFC, we've had NASCAR, we've had PGA. It's starting to come and fall into place.
Crazy to think that exactly maybe 1 month from today, July 24th, there could be opening day baseball.
That could be it.
Hopefully.
I'm excited, PJ.
I am too. What a great episode. Sean McDonough was phenomenal.
I'm still very afraid that the Mets win the World Series. So because the people could.
Joe, I promise you, if the Mets win the World Series, you will not apologize to anyone.
You know what?
You're
right.
grasping to that forever.
You know what? You're right.
Because at the end of the day, you probably still have to go through the Dodgers, and that in itself would be a pretty impressive feat.
That's true. For me, it's just you got to go through the playoffs still. No matter what, you still got to go through that. And
that's exactly right.
We hope that it gets exciting. I know Sean's probably excited because he's got 40 Red Sox games, and I'm still a little bummed about the the whole. Like I said, I felt bad when I told him he hates me that I didn't pick Syracuse over Maryland. But hopefully,
he's like, you guys didn't choose Syracuse, man. It's a good spokesperson for the school right there. He loves the orange.
They got that. Hopefully, we have some more of those spokespeople coming up in some future episodes that we've got little feelers out to for guests. So hopefully those come through. I love our guest for next week. I won't say who it is because anything could fall through at the last second. But love our guest next week. Very unique, very fun. But it's been fun, PJ. We're a month into this, and we finally got sports coming back.
It's about damn time, Joe. I mean, we start a sports podcast with no sports, and then
Exactly.
finally they're starting to come back. So that's good. Thank everybody for listening. Thanks again to Sean. Happy baseball's back, and we'll do it again next week.